The problematic that we've been working on is how to release force with the lead leg. For example, if we wanted to hit someone with our shin, what would we do? And we also discussed that if you've not practiced this before, but you have practiced the double hand front push, your instincts would probably be that you should use exactly the same posture, but just extend your leg out more. And then using all of the technical knowledge that we've built so far, we realised that there's a problem with doing it this way. It extends the leg so far that it unbalances the posture, and also it uses close, so the thighs are in line with one another, and that makes the posture extremely unstable. And if you do it and practice it and try it yourself, you'll feel that it collapses the whole structure at the quad, and that means that it's not rooted to the floor, so you can't push against anything, you've got no leverage. But most importantly, in Yiquan terms, it completely destroys our timing. And remember that Fa Li is really just a catch-all term that covers quite a complex physical action. So we've got to move in a short, sharp movement to create kinetic force, but then that kinetic force has got to be transmitted into the opponent, and we do that by suddenly stopping and setting the posture. And that usually happens with the feet, and usually it's both feet, but one foot is usually dominant, and in this case it's the lead foot. Using the scrape rooting, the ball of the foot's going to hit the floor, and then the heel's going to slam into the ground. And the whole timing of the posture is determined by making sure that those things are connected together, i.e. the body has to generate kinetic force, and then a split second later you have to set the posture, form the lock point, and that's the moment that you transmit force into the opponent. If, however, the posture is really big, like a kick, the point of your body that's going to hit the opponent has to travel the distance towards them first, and then right at the end, then you add on the Fa Li. And we can call that whatever we want, but for the sake of expediency, let's just call it the travelling distance. And so for a kick, about 3/4 of the posture is travelling distance, and then the last little bit is where you add in the explosive movement. And obviously the more compact a posture is, the less travelling distance there is. But the elements of Fa Li have always got to be close together, so release of kinetic force, set the posture, hit the lock point, they've all got to be within the space of a fraction of a second. The rules can be bent a little bit so we can have what we call a distributed set, so we can just stretch that to just slightly more than a fraction of a second, but we can't go beyond that, otherwise by the time you hit the opponent, the kinetic force has already been dissipated. There's a limit to how far you can stretch those elements, and it's a tiny, tiny limit. So if you are going to have any travelling distance, it's always got to be before that event, that combined event of the release of kinetic force, the set of the posture, and the lock point. It's always got to happen before. Those things have always got to happen together. They can't be separated. And this is why we have to spend time cultivating highly efficient structural movement. And I think people very often don't see the connection between stillness, slow movement, and then fast movements. But they're all, as Wang Shangjai says, they're really just all the same thing on a continuum. And they're all working towards knitting that structure together. But then remember, we also have to think about what is the problem we're trying to solve here. So the double front push hand posture is a particular kind of problem that we need to solve by stacking the structure in a particular way. And the way the posture is set is determined by what the actual posture is, i.e. we're using your hands to do a double front hand push. And if you're able to, you can stand up and try this yourself and see that if you stack the posture using open, it makes it lead hand dominant, and that means that you would only be pushing with your lead hand. And that is actually how we stack a lead hand push. So for the double front push, we change. We use close, similar to a cross, only a cross uses rotational Fa Li round the vertical axis. The double front push uses Fa Li from the qua axis, i.e. bending your body forwards, i.e. it uses sink. And the lead foot absolutely cannot travel any further than it does without collapsing the whole structure. But that's because the posture is stacked to support what the hands are doing, a double push, whereas we don't want to do a double push. Our problematic now is how do we hit with the shin? And the solution to that is simple. That's a lead limb posture, so we use open. Like a lead leg kick, it shifts a lot of the weight onto the back leg rather than it being distributed onto the front leg. And when you use open, you can push the leg out further, or by definition it will just push the leg forwards more. And it will also keep more of the weight backwards. And remember that when we use close with the push, there's a limit to how far we can extend that foot out before the posture starts becoming structurally unbalanced. And particularly if we want to use that hard set with the lead foot, if we stretch that right out, then we tumble forwards off balance. But even if we use open, there's still a limit to how far we can stick that leg out safely. We can get it further out than when we use close, but we can't go too far with it. And here you've got to really beware your tricksy intents, which will try and do things like push your knee forwards to get more power into the posture. Remember, it's like the primitive use of the context, just thinking like you can just add more power in by using more sink, leaning the foot forward. Whereas you just have to accept that there's a limit to how far you can stack this posture wider, even using open. So you can see here clearly the difference that using open gives you just a little bit extra distance to get in and hit with the leg. And this is a useful little exercise in itself, just using hit and flow to move between close and open with the lead leg. And next we really need to think about how we set this posture, so you can't get the speed that you need if you've got all of your weight on your lead foot right from the start. You've got to lift your weight up. I'm exaggerating it here obviously, but you just lift your weight so you feel the weight come off the sole of your foot. Remember Yao Zhongzun saying the point where you release force is a vulnerability, and this is a great example because you've got to lift up that weight and then just drop it down again using sink. And if you go too far out, then the toes start to lift up in effect, and then the heel hits, and then it's a slide risk. So you can only go so far anyway, and you can only go so far within the rules of the structure itself. Again, this is knowledge that's in you, in your body. It's not in any teacher. And you really need to be able to maximize the set. So you've got to practice hitting with the ball of the foot and then dropping the heel. Particularly with this posture, you can't get as much zing on the set of the posture because it's distributed more between the lead leg and the rear leg. So what we do is we break down this posture itself, i.e. hitting with the ball of the foot and then hitting with the heel, and we practice this on its own in a very particular exercise that's called bear carries a vat. Usually you do it with your hands out like you're carrying something, but I'm just demonstrating the footwork here. And I know it looks a little bit silly, but you're never going to get anywhere if you worry about what people think about what you look like. This is an absolutely crucial exercise, and all the variations of it, crucial exercises for understanding and learning how to get this footwork correct, because this is how we set postures when we're hitting at a closer range. After practicing that, when you go back to working on this posture, just work on the legs and try and feel as much force as you possibly can going down onto the lead heel. The force is going to be distributed, or the set is distributed across both heels, but try and get as much as you can, and you'll feel that it's nowhere near as much as you get when you do the front hand push. So break it down into an individual exercise, but remember, we're always trying to maximize our power, so there's other things that we can bring into this posture yet to try and improve the power generation. And the first thing is to do exactly what we did with the double push, which is to bring in sink. And in exactly the same way, as the heel sets into the floor, we use this little dip of the body, this little Farley hit down with the chest from the quad axis. And remember, that's how we emphasised the compression set when we used the double hand push posture. Whereas now when we use open, it seems to, well, it does, it naturally kind of pulls the body back, and there feels to be a significant difference, and it feels like you can no longer use that. But remember, this is an unorthodox posture, so we can overrule how our body feels, and instead of leaning forwards at the tummy, we can just lean over the hip a little bit and get a little bit of that compression set in. Again, you've got to be really careful because the instinct is to get right over the knee and bend the knee forwards. You've got to get the right balance between the two. Just a little bit of a lean over the hip, and then just put the foot out as far as it can go. You can see already the legs are quite splayed. You can just get a little bit of that sink into the posture to aid the compression set. And again, if I exaggerate it, you can see exactly what's going on with the body mechanics, but we've got to get them refined. We've got to get them into a tiny little space. But we can see that all of our body weight is going to explosively launch forwards using open and sink. And it's not going to be the most powerful hit in the world. It's not easy to generate a lot of force from your shin or your lead leg. But remember the principle that the power of the posture is significantly dependent on the strength or weakness of the target. If we can hit the opponent's leg while it's weak or off balanced, or just to distract them, or just to buckle their structure a little bit, that's absolutely fine. And it's also, as you can see here, you can see exactly why it's, in the old days, it's the way that the lead hand jab was set. And we can take from that, without using the actual lead hand technique, we can take the other part of it, the rear hand going backwards, and we can add in the oppositional force. It's going to create that twisting round the vertical axis and just add a little bit of extra force into it. And that would also, for example, be how you pull someone. If you had hold of their arm and you pull them back and then hit with the leg to try and unbalance them. And from there, it's just a matter of practicing, working on different variations and just double checking you're not overextending the posture.